Hey, good evening, everyone. It's time for class, and our facilitator is already here. So I believe the 5 minutes I was given is already set up for us to have settled in. So very quickly, we'll introduce our facilitator for today, Mr. Abusayo, and he'll be taking us on advocacy and policy influencing. So quickly, I'll read his bio while we start. Busayo Oluwadamilare Morakinyo (BOM) is a co-founder of Creative Ideation Hub, a social innovation co-creation community that supports and develops young Africans' innovative civic tech and government tech ideas, creating local solutions for local problems through experimental lean testing of these solutions that benefits their home communities. He engineered the growth and scale of the fast-growing social accountability movement in Africa. He is also recognized as an exceptional global talent for demonstrating his expertise and exceptional abilities in social development and digital technology by the United Kingdom. As a disruptive innovator with a Pan-African focus, he has a proven track record of successfully managing partnerships with diverse range of stakeholders and partners in Africa's social development ecosystem, including governments, policymakers, community-based organizations, civil society, and donors. He is a two-time TEDx speaker who has mastered the act and art of storytelling as a tool for citizen mobilization and participation. So, ladies and gentlemen, our facilitator for today, Mr. Busayo. Welcome, sir. It's great to have you here again.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, guys. I bet we're doing very well today. Great to be here. Speaking with you guys. If you can hear me, leave an emoji in the comments, so that I'm able to know that I'm not speaking to myself alone. Um, okay. Okay. Yep. All right. Okay, great. So let's dive in. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to join the Electoral College after every cohort to be able to share some of our thoughts around the subject matter. Shout out to our Oga, Mr. Kunle Lawal, for the great work he's been doing, and to Lisa also, who's been holding it down. Well done, guys. I would want to ask that we suspend, if we can, the introduction on the chat box, so that I'm able to follow up on conversations on the chat box as I speak. So if you can, please don't introduce yourselves again, so that we would leave the chat box very clean. Thank you so much. Like it's been introduced, my point of reflection. I thought I just said people should stop introducing themselves, and can still see guys introducing themselves. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, the reason why I said you should stop is so that I can follow up with the chat box, right? For people who are able to leave comments. So let's keep it quiet for a bit. Yeah, so effective advocacy and policy influencing is something that is really big on my heart, and not just because I am interested in making noise all over the place, but it's something that I know every citizen, every human, every individual needs to have. It's a skill that everybody needs to have. And the reason why this skill is important is in every sphere of life, especially when it comes to the field of governance and even politics. One of the things that you cannot overemphasize is the need for us to have, the right kind of conversations. And if you understand governance, you would know that governance in itself, is just about managing policies. And for you to be able to influence those policies, there's a skill that comes with it. And that's why I think Lisa and you know Kunle Lawal, sees this as very important as part of the knowledge sessions that is currently being shared. And I know you guys have had various sessions, so I would not speak so much out of my focus. So let's take a deep dive on this interesting thing called advocacy. Um, if we had some time, I would have told few people to unmute their mic to share with me their thoughts on advocacy, but I'll just move very quickly. Advocacy is when you challenge those in authority to make decisions, when you get them to change policies, programs, and plans in such a way that are fair, equitable, and favor the disadvantaged and powerless people in the community. This is always the first definition I put out there, and the reason is quite deliberate. Because this encapsulates everything you probably want to know about advocacy and a little bit of policy influencing. Now, for advocacy, the reason why you are engaging in that process is to challenge those who are in authority to make decisions. So probably you feel like, they're quite kind of silent, right? If the major reason why there are people leading government is if the major reason for their leadership is to drive to ensure that governance is delivered at every level, then advocacy gives us the opportunity, to challenge them, to make the right kind of decisions. But it doesn't stop there. We can also use advocacy to change policies. There's probably a policy that doesn't make sense. We can get on an advocacy to change that. There's probably a program of government that you feel, nah, I mean, this doesn't cut it. The right thing to do is to advocate to get that policy, that program changed. There's and I mean, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It happens in such a way that fairness, equity, and the plight of the disadvantaged and powerless people in community comes to the front burner. So most often than not, you would see that people who lead advocacy sometimes are not, mostly do not share in the real pain of what that advocacy is all about. Sometimes it happens that way, but most times I've seen. So, for example, one of the major advocacies that happened in 2020 was the NSAS protest. A bunch of the people who came out for that protest were not people who had been harassed directly, by the police, but because that advocacy, became a big conversation, it was easy for people to come out and identify with other people, who have gone through, that challenge or that problem. Um, Another advocacy that comes to mind has been an advocacy around the Ogoni people. How many of us know what happened in Ogoni? Any student of history? Leave it in the chat. What do you think happened, in Ogoni land? Do we have anyone who knows what happened in Ogoni? Yeah, oil spillage. Great, thank you. You're following. Amazing. Now, the people of Ogoni had experienced oil spillage for a very long time, and there were some people who came up who were from Ogoni land who came up and started advocating that the land should be protected and the land should be cleaned. And these people, as a part of these people, is the renowned journalist Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was leading the charge as a journalist. Massive advocacy, but we know what happened to the Ogoni Nine, right? And now Ken Saro-Wiwa is from Ogoni land, so he could relate the problem as a domestic problem, and he led an advocacy for that. So if you look at advocacy, you would realize that sometimes you may be advocating for what really doesn't affect you in any way. Other times you can be advocating for something that hits you or connects to you directly. But the fact that you are speaking on behalf of disadvantaged people, for the fact that what you're driving at, is something that helps other people, for the fact that what you're engaging with is something that helps other people, amplifies their voices, what you're doing at that point is you're advocating on their behalf. So you can be advocating for yourself, you can be advocating on the behalf of people. I make this dimension to say that it is not only when something affects you directly that you advocate about. It can affect your neighbors, it can affect children, it can affect women. There's an advocacy currently going on which is called the 16 Days of Action, and it's about gender-based violence, ensuring that globally the world speaks on behalf of them. You don't need to be a woman to speak against gender-based violence. You don't need to be a woman who has been abused or a man who has been abused to speak against gender-based violence. You just need to be human to speak on this issue. And I've also seen that in our realities in Nigeria, people dictate what others should advocate for. I've seen few people say the celebrities we have should advocate for various things. And the truth of the matter is, it's not every advocacy that tickles everybody's fancy. And you would see that in this class that sometimes what we even call advocacy is really not advocacy. And because advocacy takes various dimensions, and we're going to get into that very quickly. I wanted to stay on this for a minute so that you get the idea, we're coming with. I have other definitions that I'm just going to gloss over. Advocacy can also mean when you're speaking up or drawing attention of a community about an issue that affects them. When you cause a public debate to happen, that's also an advocacy. And I like this definition because it talks about finding solutions. Some of us think advocacy is just when we talk. No, advocacy is when you talk and also when you create solutions, when you find solutions, when you have ideas around what the solutions can be. Guys, if you're just joining this class, I said that we could suspend the introduction we have on the chat because I'm looking at the chat for anyone who has questions, right? So if you have questions as I speak, leave the questions in the chat so that I can address them as I'm speaking and so that we don't have too many questions at the end. So please, if you're just coming in, don't introduce yourself. We already know you. I know you're using this for a roll call. I'll probably let you do that. But for the meantime, just don't mix up the chat box, right? Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Let's look at another definition. Advocacy also means when you take action. So now you're not just speaking about the issue. You are now taking action about the issue. You are not just finding solution already only. You are actively living that solution or you're showing that solution, right? So it's taking action so that those in power or responsibility can change their negative attitude on behalf, as it concerns, disadvantaged and the poor people in the society, because we need to treat everyone as humans. Some of you on this in this class, who are probably married and you have children, or you have a wife, or you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Once in a while, your your partner or your children can reach out to you to say, I don't like this thing you're doing. I want you to change it. That's also a form of advocacy. So advocacy is not only where you engage with government. You can advocate within your company, within your office. You can advocate in your family. Those of you who have very large extended families, where decision making, is not just a one man affair. Even if it's a one man affair, you can raise up your hand to say, no, that is not great. I don't want that to happen, right? So advocacy is about you being able to take actions, so that those people in the position of power or responsibilities can change, their attitude. And I think this is one of the most important definitions I always give to advocacy. It is developing proactive strategies and tactics. It is developing proactive strategies and tactics that aims at building the power, the clout, the energy of community members so that they can be able to claim their rights and entitlement. I always say to everyone that has attended my class that advocacy is scientific, and someone who is probably studied physics or chemistry or one of those science-based courses would ask, how is advocacy scientific? Advocacy is scientific because it involves proven strategies, tested strategies. It involves tactics, and when we talk about tactics, we're not just talking about the normal things that you do. It has to go through a certain level of intelligence, for you to be able to achieve the kind of results you want. And in this case, what you want is to build power. Because when you get into governance, one of the things that needs to be balanced is the power structure. And so the reason why we're in a democracy and we're not in the military rule is because we've been able to place power in the democratic process. So there's a president, we have the judiciary, and we have the members of the parliament. We've been able to centralize power across the board. It's not just one person. So we don't have a dictatorship in Nigeria. Even if some people would argue that currently, it seems like, from the last government to this government, we're seeing more trappings of dictatorship because of the clampdown on citizens' voices and people who do not speak in favor of the government. It's very important. So let's jump quickly to another interesting part. When to advocate? When do we advocate? We know what advocacy is: building clouds, building power, using strategies, developing tactics. So if you know that, the next question a curious mind will be asking is, so yes, I know this, so when can I advocate? And I have few examples. I'm not going to look through all. You can look through all yourself. I'll just pick some. When there are problems that affect disadvantaged communities, we've spoken about this. When you realize that this is a problem and it's affecting, disadvantaged communities, it's a good place, it's a good time, to advocate. You also know that when you are demanding for the rights of the people, it's also a good place, a good time to advocate. I'll speak about when there's a link between local, national, regional, and international issues. So, for example, we've had the situations of kidnapping across the country, kidnapping of children in schools. Now, though those schools are, across local governments, and across state governments, it is no longer a local problem. It's now become a national problem. It's no longer a national problem alone. It's a global problem, because the world is increasingly seeing that children are being kidnapped from schools in Nigeria. And so, for example, you have a Donald Trump, in the US, begins to speak about what they call a Christian genocide. You can argue from today to tomorrow about if there's a Christian genocide or not. But the reality on the ground is people are being killed. And even in critical war zones, it doesn't happen that people get killed like that. So it has become a concern for the global space. It's become an international concern. And so Nigeria has to be designated as a country of particular, what is it called? What do they call it? country of particular interest, right? Now, you can say these issues are very small issues, but it can grow into national issues, it can become national issues, it can become regional issues, it can also become, so for example, just about few weeks ago, or a few days ago, there was a coup in Benin, and that coup was able to be diluted in good time. The reason is because the West African region, like never before in the last over 20 years, is beginning to get characterized. Thank you, particular concern. Thank you. Is beginning to get characterized by frequent coups. And so, there was a need to make a bold statement. It's a regional, the West African sub-region, is currently falling to the military boys. The military boys want to come back. So it's important for you to know when to advocate in your advocacy journey. Let's move quickly to the next slide. It's called something I call the targets of advocacy. And I'll just briefly say that a target is a person or individual in the position of authority at any level, who can be able to give you, the decisions that you want, who can be able to either influence the decisions that you want or are able to respond to you in the decisions that you want. It's very, very important. It's one of the things I say to everyone who attends my class. Remember that I said that advocacy is a strategy work. It's big on strategy. It's big on tactics. And if advocacy is as big on tactics and strategy as I think it is important for you in your strategy to identify who the target of your advocacy should be. And on this, we have two levels. There's what is called the primary target, and there's what is called the secondary target. You can see it on your screen that your primary target are those people or persons, or individuals who has the power and the authority to make decisions, right? It means that, for example, if my advocacy is around education, I am able to understand who are the people who has the power within the education space. I'm able to understand who those people are. I'm able to understand the capacity of those people to make decisions, right? So immediately, if I know that the Commissioner of Education is the one who is responsible, that becomes a primary target. Now, a secondary target is a person who is not the ultimate decision maker, but the person has an influence on the chain of decision making, right? So most times in my advocacy work privately, I have had opportunities to engage secondary targets to be able to get my primary targets to do what I want, right? And this starts from a point where I tactfully and skillfully identify these various people. So I'm talking about education. I want to engage with the Commissioner of Education, right? But he's proven difficult. But I can understand that maybe his wife, is someone I have access to, and his wife is able to drive my advocacy to him wherever they meet themselves. It could be in the bedroom or in the kitchen. Now, though the Commissioner of Education is my primary target because he has that power to make the decisions, I am going through a secondary target to get to my primary target. Now, this is part of the strategies I've spoken about, right? So what this means is it can even be the driver. It can even be the clerk in the office. It could be the messenger. Anyone who is able to influence the decision of your primary target falls into your secondary target category, while your primary target is also there. It's very, very important that you do not forget this, because as you continue in your work as conscious citizens, as you continue in your work, out of here, these are the kind of strategies that can help your advocacy, make very solid, have solid rooting. Let's quickly move move on from targets of advocacy, and let's stay a bit on policy influencing. Remember, I said that our topic is effective advocacy and policy influencing. Now, a recap. We spoke about what advocacy is, right? We spoke about what advocacy is not. A little. I'm still going to tie everything together, right? We spoke about when you can advocate. And we also spoke about, we said, there are various times when you can advocate, when you understand what the problems are, when you understand the root cause of the problem, when you can find the connection between local, national, regional, and international realities, when you demand for the rights of people. We now went further to identify your targets of advocacy, which is your primary target, the person who has the ability to make the ultimate decision, and your secondary target, who is able to influence, the people who make these decisions, right? So let's stay a bit on policy influencing. And if you'd follow me quickly, you can read out. You don't have to unmute yourself, but I want you to read this out, by yourself. I'll give you 30 seconds. Everyone, please read this out to yourself before I start speaking on it. 30 seconds, your time starts now. If you're done reading it, give me a thumbs up, send me an emoji, send me something to know you're done reading. Let me give you another 30 seconds for those people who are not as fast in reading. Okay, great. Now, policy influencing is the deliberate and systematic, emphasis on the word deliberate, and systematic process of influencing the policies, practices, and behaviors of different targeted stakeholders that are most influential on an issue involving beneficiaries and increasing their ownership and capacity on the issue. Now, the words that are in white are in white so that you understand in clearer terms what policy influencing is. It is a deliberate process. It is a systematic process, but this process is not in isolation. This process is done to influence government policies. It's done to influence government practices. It's done to influence government behaviors, right? But these behaviors is not just for the primary, stakeholders alone or the primary targets alone. It's for both the primary and the secondary targets. Remember, we just spoke about that in targets of an advocacy, right? But these people are people who are most influential on an issue. But it doesn't stop there. It must involve the beneficiaries, the people you are advocating for, and you must be able to increase the ownership of the people, and their capacity on the issue. Oh, someone is saying network is so terrible. My bad. So sorry about that. I hope I hope the network is not from me. I hope it's just a personal experience. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. You can leave an, yeah, great. Thank you, Victoria. You're far too kind. So you can hear me loud and clear. Sorry about the network, Deborah. We could try to reconnect again. Now, policy influencing does not just stop, and I'm going to show you that in the next slide. It does not just stop on you advocating for the people. You must be able to increase the people's ownership of the problem. And when I talk about increasing their ownership, I mean that the people must not perceive the issue just as an issue alone. No, I'm saying that these people must be able to deliberately become a part of the solutions of the problem. So you must build their capacity enough for them to be able to understand what the problem is, understand the reason why the problem exists, but much more than that, co-create solutions to the problem. Remember, let me take you back to one of my definitions of advocacy. Advocacy is not just only when you talk about the problem, but when you create solutions for the problem. Now, in policy influencing, we are now saying that it is not enough for you to create those solutions alone. You can't create those solutions in isolation. You must be able to carry along the people who are most affected by this problem, and you must be able to build their capacity on the issue. So your advocacy is not complete when you are the only one talking about the problem. When community begins to also talk about the problem, and they are not just talking, they are taking actions to solve the problem, then you are hitting the marks around, policy influencing. And I'll explain that a bit more. I've delved into advocacy versus policy influencing. So let's just look at some principles of policy influencing. One of the major principles on public influencing, the abbreviation is CLASP. In case you're writing, it's CLASP. The C stands for credibility. Why would people trust you? I've said it jokingly that there are a whole lot of people who call themselves advocates, that should not be called advocates because they lack credibility. People cannot trust you. You're probably, I've said that a whole lot of people should just remain being the thieves that they are. I've seen people who have gone on advocacy and they collected money from communities that are suffering, and they disappeared. Nobody's going to trust you again. You lost your credibility, right? You're just a thief. You're just a political jobber, right? So if you want to be able to influence policies through advocacy, credibility becomes important. The second thing is L, which is legitimacy. Who or what gives you the right to interfere? Right? This is very important. Who or what gives you the right to interfere? And this is the legitimacy question. Are you a member of the community? Are the issues in the community, does it affect you? Those issues, how can you relate to it? Are you from that community? These are legitimate questions. What gives you the capacity? What gives you the capacity to engage in the community? These are very important questions, right? The next thing, which is also important, is accountability. How accountable are you? Can people, are you able to be sure that whatever you do, your accountability stands, on the highest pedestal? And this talks about transparency towards deciders and constituents. Now, this is a very delicate one, right? Because for some people, they have sided with the deciders, and the constituencies cannot trust them. The community members can't trust them, right? And I'll explain this, probably on the next slide a bit more. On accountability, are you accountable? Are you transparent? Did you meet with the deciders today and you go back and say something totally different to the community members, right? These are very, very important. Service. How are you being helpful? Sometimes some people get into a conversation and they think what they are doing is advocacy, but they are messing up the whole situation the more. Your policy influencing or advocacy must be a win-win. You should be able to know how to decide on, when it's actually enough. It's very, very important. Then last but not the least, the P is power. What is your power base? How do you use it? Are you collaborative or you want to go alone? Do you even believe in your message? These are very important principles, that you need, every one of us, needs to begin to imbibe. Let's look at some approaches. There are various profiles to this advocacy that we're talking about, right? It's on 3 levels. The first level is the low profile. This is quiet negotiation. You're having meetings, you're sharing information, you're meeting civil servants. You're not doing anything in public. You're just doing everything, quietly. They do not respond to you. You take it a notch higher. Go to the medium profile where you're still negotiating, a little public brief. You are now beginning to give the opposition information, the data you have. You appear at community meetings. You have alliances everywhere. And the third level is, the high profile public criticism. This is where you go on channels TV. You're doing media advocacy. You're releasing information. You're writing letters. There are protest marches. You're going on the streets. You're demonstrating. But in all of these three levels, what is important is, you need to win. And for us, the goal to win is more important. The goal to win is what is going to reflect on the kinds of advocacy, that we are going to participate in. Right. So let's look at steps in a successful advocacy and policy influencing. I'm going to rush so that I can be able to take questions. The first step is ranking your decision makers. This is very important. Any advocacy you want to go for that you do not rank your decision makers, it means that you do not recognize your target, right? And in ranking your decision makers, the first question you want to ask is, who are my definite supporters? Who are the people that would support me? Who are the people that are most likely to support me? Your potential supporters. Who are those people who, if I convince them a little bit more, they would come to my way? The fence sitters, those people who are undecided, they don't care really. I mean, they're just there. They can swing anyway. You must be able to understand who are your likely opponents, the people that would, fight you. But if you're able to convince them, they can switch base. Then the fifth is your definite opponent. These ones would never listen. They would always, be opposed to what I want to do. Now, if you look at this ranking, one of the things we try to advise is you want to be able to flip your definite opponents to your likely opponents. You want to be able to move your likely opponent to the fence sitter. You want to be able to move your fence sitter to your potential supporter. You want to be able to move your potential supporter to your definite supporter. Remember, the goal is for you to win. So it has, and this is where the strategies comes in, the tact, the intelligence, needed, comes in. The next thing is, in terms of, you need to familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. Those of you who wants to get involved in politics, those of you, who wants to, serve your community, it's very important for you to familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. And when I talk about familiarizing yourself with the corridors of power, I'm not saying you should begin to go from one government office to the other. I'm saying that you need to learn about the rules, the processes, and people that are most important to your issue. You don't want to be speaking about education and you're going to the Ministry of Health. It's a misplaced priority. It's mismatched. You also want to understand how to engage with people when you get into that space. You also know that, the way you talk is very, very important. The way you dress is very important. The way you appear is very, very important. So you need to familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. We cannot overemphasize that. You need to classify your players. Like I've said, knowing who your possible allies are, knowing who your opponents are, knowing who your targets are. Remember, I told you your secondary and primary targets are very, very important. There are some advocacies I've been on, and the people who got me the best results were my secondary targets. People who could influence the decision maker while I'm not there. It's very, very important, right? Now this is also utmostly important. Inform and build relationships. You have to build relationships. You cannot travel alone on your advocacy, right? You have to, one of the lies we say to ourselves is that, when you're advocating to change a government policy, you cannot be friendly with people in government. You think everybody in government is stupid, or you think everybody in government is a thief. That's not true. There are people within government who do not like what is happening, and they are ready to give you all the information or all the support you need to be able to, get the kind of results you want to get, right? So you need to build relationships. Relationship building is very, very important, both formal and informal relationships. But I need to put a caveat that you must be careful with the kind of relationships that you build. And I've given this example of how my team and I some time ago went to a government office, somewhere in Jos, and we're doing an advocacy for basic education. And, the commissioner of education had packaged some fund in an envelope and wanted to give to us, and because of my personal principles as an advocate and, the organizational principles, I knew that there was nothing on earth that was going to make me take that money. But I also knew that they were just trying to be friendly. They were not trying to bribe me, quote and unquote. But I also understood that I needed not to take the money, but I needed to pass that information in a way that does not hamper the relationship. And luckily for me, we had some friends from the press, so it was easy for me to say to the commissioner that as a personal policy, I don't take money from government. My organization doesn't also take money from government. But I know that my friends from the press, would take the money, so I redirected the money, to the people in the press. I had to use that wisdom because I didn't want to break the relationship. For some of you, you may take this out of context and begin to fight that, no, this is the money you're supposed to use to develop the schools. You're giving it to me. All of you are thieves. No, you don't do that. You will lose them, when you do that. So you must be very careful when you build relationships, but relationship building is important. Now let's speak a bit about dimensions of an advocacy. These dimensions is what I was trying to explain earlier when I said that you need to build the capacity of the people you're advocating on their behalf, right? So the dimensions are on 3 levels. The first level is when you're advocating for the beneficiaries and marginalized people. I usually say that this is the lowest level of advocacy, right? Because it's just you speaking on the behalf of community. The second level is when you're speaking with the beneficiaries and marginalized people. What this simply means is you have built their capacity enough to the point where they understand what the issues are, they know what the solutions should be. So it is now collaborative. The both of you who is leading the advocacy and the community who are the beneficiaries, are doing this work together. But the highest level of advocacy for me is when the community members themselves are the ones speaking. So with or without you being there, they are able to hold their ground and speak. For me, your advocacy is not complete when you're just the only one speaking on behalf of the community. You must be able to build the capacity of community enough and grow with them patiently and gradually to the level where the both of you are the ones speaking, and ultimately when it is the community who is speaking for themselves. It's very important. So let's look at various tools for advocacy. Successful advocacy requires media. Could be the radio, it could be newspaper, it could be TV. You cannot do an advocacy without research. Data is important. If you don't know the issues, it is the data that speaks to the issues. If you don't know the issues, you don't have any business advocating. It's very important. Mobilizing and campaigning. There are times when, for example, you need people to come to the street, for protests or whatever you want to call it. You have to be able to mobilize, right? Whether we like it or not. One of the biggest successes of the Not Too Young to Run campaign was the fact that, everyone was able to mobilize people to the streets. And as people were doing the advocacy on the streets, there were people doing the advocacy at the back door, at the corridors of power. Very important. Information dissemination. People should be able to know what you're talking about. And so I told you data research is important because research gives you data. When you get that data, your ability to share that data to the necessary people in terms of, as policy briefs becomes very important. Monitoring and evaluation. Cannot overemphasize monitoring and evaluation. You have to come back to ask yourself, what am I doing? What have I done? Does it make sense? Are we making progress? Should we change the strategy? It's very, very important. Then litigation and lobbying. In some instances, you want to go to court, right? You want to sue the government to court. I know few people who have done that, taking the government to court. They don't care about what the justice system is. They just take the government to court. And some people have won the government in court, Now, lobbying refers, comes in when you probably go through, back doors, back channels. For me personally, and because Nigeria has not been able to create an ethics around lobbying, I personally do not advise lobbying as it is done in Nigeria. In the United States, there are ethics around lobbying. There are things that you cannot do. There are limitations, there are restrictions. But in Nigeria, is a free for all system. Then we talk about protests, and rallies. These are very, very important. These are very, very important points. Now, I usually want to give this as a classwork, which is a practical session. And this practical session shows you all the steps you need to take to develop an advocacy, to build a communications, a strategy for an advocacy and policy influencing. If you are able to do, and some of you can take it up as your project or as your case study within your political parties, if you're able to go from step 1 on any issue, from step 1 to step 8, if you're able to practice, you're going to be able to develop more skill, in advocacy. Now, I always usually say to people that advocacy is a skill that can be learned. Is a skill that can be learned, and the more you engage in it, the better you become at it. The more at first you may be crude, but the more you keep doing it, you become better at it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to me today. I will take questions. This is the end of our class for today. By the way, this is my shortest class ever on this session. Sometimes we do as much as 2 hours on these sessions, but I decided to keep it short today, so that we'll take more questions. We'll have time for more questions. So let's get in. If you have questions, raise your hand if you want to speak. If you want to leave it in the chat box, my eyes is on the chat box. If you have questions, you can raise your hands. Moderator, over to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It's always amazing to see you. Thank you for your time. Class, you know the drill. You can raise your virtual hand if you have a question, and you'll be given an opportunity to ask. Or else you can put it in the chats. If you are in a very noisy environment, put it in the chats. Okay, we have a hand.
Yeah, Victoria, go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. So I want to ask, if you want to advocate in a field that probably is not your field, but you are living in an environment that something is of concern, I do find it difficult of understanding the steps, the procedure, because at times we feel it's difficult to go into a field that you don't really know. So I don't know. Let me give an example. Like, let's say you are living in a place that all those people that are throwing tire with condemned tire, and there are some people that are looking for the wire inside the tire. Every night they keep on burning such things. So that is not actually my field, but I'm so concerned that probably one can go to the waste management and make some moves, or I don't know, but with what you said today, secondary and primary tire, I don't know.
Primary target.
Yes, if you can counsel on how I should go about that, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. That's very valid, and spot on. That's a typical example of someone who is wanting to make a change within their community. Now, the first thing you need to do is to, research, gather data. How often do they burn these tires? How do those tires get there? Just by observation. You don't need to do anything. By observation, you need to look at the government agency that is responsible for environment, right? You need to look for that government agency, right? You also need to identify the right offices for you to go to. So are you going to, so for example, if you're in Abuja, what local government are you in Abuja? Are you in Amak? Are you in Buari, for example? You need to first of all engage at your local government level. Now, you know that on your local government level now, on your targets, you look at the secretary in charge of environment. That's on one level. The second level, you look at probably the chairman of the local government, right? That's on another level. If those two people are not responsive, you probably want to now move it to the FCTA and look at the person in charge of environment in the FCTA, right? If that person is not, you also want to look at the minister of the Federal Capital Territory. Now, so you've been able to map out all of these few people, for example. Now you now come back and ask yourself, how do I engage with them? Do you have enough pictures? Do you have enough videos? Do you have videos and pictures of people burning the tires? You probably want to involve the police in your stakeholders mapping, right? So when you look at all of these prevailing circumstances, you now come up with your messaging. If these people, remember I said there's the low profile where you're just having meetings, you're having conversations, this is what is happening, it doesn't make sense. If they do not respond to you, you probably want to take it a notch higher. You probably want to go to a radio station. You probably want to go live on TikTok, or you go live on Facebook, or you go live on Instagram. Something to drag the attentions of people, on that issue you're talking about. Now, in the process of doing all these things, you realize that you're not the only one that is facing this problem. It's not just your community that is facing this problem. Other people begin to relate with the problem you're facing. Now, what now happens is you're now growing a voice. Remember the definition of advocacy that talks about power and clout. You're growing a voice, you're growing a following. So even if environmental sustainability is not your core, but because you are taking a step around environmental sustainability, people are recognizing the work that you're doing, and they are agreeing with you, and they are joining forces with you to do the same thing. You would realize that in no too distant time, you're becoming a professional at environmental sustainability, because you've engaged various government institutions, you've done your due diligence, you have data, you have, and when I talk about data, picture is part of the data you get. You have videos, you are now engaging on social media. People are now listening to you. Other people will say, this is happening. You are building your power. You may not like Very Dark Man, but Very Dark Man has been able to build a clout and a power around himself, so much so that he can boldly say he's the fourth arm of government. No matter what that, I don't know what that means. But you see, he saw a need and he took the lead. The problem is, those of us who have more knowledge, in-depth knowledge on how to do these things better, we're not able to put ourselves out there enough. And so people who do not know how to do advocacy are the ones who have now become advocates. And so everybody is now bashing advocates. So you must be able to realize that, your ability to build your voice, is a gradual process, but you should build your voice, because it's going to help you solve that problem, and it's going to help you solve other problem, and other people are going to see that you're supporting them to solve their problem, and you are also going to begin to build their capacities on how to solve their problem. Do you understand, Victoria?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. It was nice speaking with you. Celestine, let's take you. Celestine?
Yes, thank you very much. I was waiting for the go ahead to unmute from the
please go ahead. 30 seconds.
Good evening, sir. Your first things first, your slide is a breath of fresh air. I love it. I love them, rather.
Thank you.
My question largely has to do with how to particularly do stakeholder mapping. So, for instance, I'm very concerned about youth participation, and I know that the vast majority of ways to get youth nowadays is through media. And the government that they want to air their opinion to, or suggest ideas or improvement to, they are not on these social media, specifically local government agencies, because they are the ones closest to them. How do they get access to people in that climb? I don't know if you
Yeah,
get my
great.
question.
Yeah, I get your question 100%. Your stakeholders mapping is very important, but like I said, your stakeholders must be tied to the issue you want to solve, right? So if you want to solve an issue around education, for example, if you want to solve an issue around education, one of the few people you need to be looking at is the educational secretary at the local government level. So you can go to the local government office and ask of the education secretary. They're always there. Those people are quite jobless, unfortunately. You know, they may not be on seats, but if you look very well, they may be eating granite under the tree, right? It's their attitude. So, I mean, that's on a lighter note. But you can always walk in there and say, I want to see the education secretary. You know, I want to see the health secretary. You know, I want to even see the local government chairman. It's within your rights as a citizen to be able to engage at this level. You know, but you need to do your homework. Who knows this person? Is there anyone within my space that knows this person? Is there anybody that is able to drive this? You know, so that's how you start your stakeholder mapping. It's not really in the big things. It's actually in the small things. Start from somewhere, start small, you know, and continue to scale. Yeah, Ondufa, go ahead. Ondufa, can you go ahead, please?
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for the session. And I'm kind of curious about this. Like, have you ever had to, when maybe you are trying to advocate for a particular community and they are not even bothered about it, they don't even know that the problem you are identifying is not even a problem at all. I come from a community where there are lots of illegal mining activities because of we have a lot of natural resources. And then this is claiming the lives of many people, and then nobody is even talking about it. Nobody is even concerned because of the immediate money that they are getting from the whole mining activities. They are not doing the whole processes where nothing is going on in this that is legalized. They are just doing it, and then it's claiming the lives of people, it's polluting the environment, and nobody's even talking about it. And then when you try to talk to the community, nobody will even want to hear because of what they are benefiting from it currently. But looking at it in the long run, it's going to be a big problem. So how do you go about that when you are trying to help somebody and that person doesn't want to be helped?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'm going to say to you is when you're helping someone and the person doesn't want to help, you leave them alone. You know, because time will tell in the long run, right? Time will tell in the long run. But what I would advise you to do is to look for an organization that is doing something around that, and you can share your ideas with them and volunteer to work with them, right? It's very, very important that you also look for people like minds who are doing stuff around, you know, the kind of advocacy you want to do, because they've probably done it before or they are currently doing it, and you're giving them a context of how to do it. It's very important. There are some issues that are quite big. There are some issues that are quite big issues that you alone cannot, you know, go against it headlong. You know, you need to now create a team. You need to create a group of people. That's one way to look at it. Secondly, you have to consistently now invest in community education. Now, this education is you showing them with empirical evidence, you know, what the problem is, what the lack of what the mining is doing to their health. And this is where research comes in. This is where data becomes important. Your ability to now go from house to house, door to door, and say to them that this thing can cause XYZ, it can cause cancer, it can kill you. These are pictures of people who have done it. These are the things that has happened to them. You know, because most times people put money ahead of their health. And it's very, very important that, you know, you help them realize, you know, what is going on at that level. It's very, very important. But I want to advise that you start from somewhere, you know, either get a group of people who are passionate about this issue, or you go through the route of educating the community members, because if you don't train them, you can't blame them. Most of them do not know, to be honest. All they just want is to make money, and survival is at the heart of a whole lot of things that happens globally. So it's very, very important. Thank you so much for that question. I hope I've been able to answer it. I'll just respond to a few questions on the chat. Excellent class. My question is about legitimacy. If you have identify an issue, but the syndrome of state of origin always comes to play, how do you manage such situations? It's quite unfortunate that this comes to play. One of the strategy I devolved for myself is to identify someone who is from that place, who sees that thing as a problem. So I always advise that for you to build an advocacy, you don't travel alone. Travel with other people who have lived experiences, so that when one person is tired, another person can take over. You can be able to bounce off energies, right? In that sense, it's very, very important. So Elvis, I would advise, look for someone who is from that place, who shares the same passion that you have, and work with that person, so that that person is like, because you guys are both concerned about it, the state of origin or the origin issue is out of the window. Tolulokwe, can we conclude that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu endeavor for Biafra nation is a form of, yes, it's a form of advocacy, 100%, 100%. We can't overemphasize it. It's a form of advocacy. Now, advocacy has principles, right? And advocacy also has its limits, right? Advocacy is a peaceful engagement. The moment violence comes in, it no longer becomes peaceful. The moment you take arm against the state, it no longer becomes peaceful. Unfortunately, the government is not happy with advocates, especially advocates that are very loud and people respect. The government, especially from our history of military rule, they are not happy with advocates. Unfortunately, we're also seeing a situation where the people who call themselves Democrats are competing, to be as brutal as the people in military rule. Like you may have seen with the last government, in terms of the government of Buhari, and also you're seeing in even this Tinubu's government. So yes, I mean, the Biafra question is a legitimate question. People talking about it, are driving legitimate question that deserves legitimate answers. They are driving an advocacy. The protests, the sit at homes, they are driving. The problem is when people now begin to get killed. It's when the rights of other people are infringed upon. That's now where the problem is, right? Because if we don't have laws, we'll have a banana republic. So I hope I answered your question, Tolulokwe, Adewale. Is there any other question? I think I've been able to answer all the questions I have. Yeah, what are steps to take in protest organizations? Sylvester, I don't really understand, this question. Please, what are steps to take in protest? Oh, okay, in organizing a protest. Oh, okay, great. Now, there's a Supreme Court ruling that says that you do not need to inform the police when you want to protest. There's a Supreme Court ruling, for that, and that's why, I'm more disappointed in the APC government. Apologies for those of you who, sorry, no apologies. I mean, I'm advocating, here, the APC as an opposition party came up, I remember the petroleum subsidy removal in 2012, in fact, even before then, I remember when Yaradua died and they didn't want to hand over power to Jonathan, the Save Nigerian group came up, protested, the 2012 protests happened. The APC was at the front burner of it. These guys have always protested. Young people decide to protest in 2020, and you shoot people at the Lekki toll gates, and you harass people, you make a whole lot of people, young people, leave the country, right? I'm really disappointed in this government, right? For you to be able to come up with a protest, for security, you can inform the police. You're not taking permission from the police, you are informing the police, of a protest. and you probably in the information you're stating the reason why you're protesting. You're protesting to a particular person. Your targets are important. Who are you protesting to? What are you protesting about? In some instances, some people don't even. I've seen single protests where people just hold their placard and they stand, they stand, in front of the government house protesting pension or something, you know. But you must be very clear and articulate. Your research is very important. The steps in a protest in an advocacy is the same thing you're going to use when you want to, when you want to build a protest. But most likely there are issues around that you want to be able to address. There are conversations you want to be able to have, and that's what is important. I hope I've been able to answer all the questions in the chat box. So yeah, great. Thank you so much, guys, for having me. I wish this cohort, success.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate you. Thank you for your time. I'm going to unmute everybody now so that you can say thank you to Mr. Busayo. Class.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. We appreciate
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys. Bye now.
All right, sir. Bye. Class, your class will continue tomorrow. And please, let's come on time. The attendance today was not impressive at all. Let's finish strong. Okay, you have 2 more classes to go. 1 class, actually. Sunday is your graduation, so let's finish strong. Dee, do we have any announcements?
No, no announcements. Hold on, Jessica.
All right, then. See you tomorrow. Good night, everyone.